So we know how to maximize our profit. We then know how to figure out how much profit we made. I do want to emphasize this is all in the short run. Remember I talked about those fixed costs, right? Those fixed costs we can't get around in the short run, or we can't change very quickly. What short run means in economics is basically before we have a chance to change our fixed costs, right? We're still stuck in our lease for our rent. It would take us too long to hire new people to expand operations, whatever it is, right? So all this profit maximization stuff depends on the idea that we're looking at sort of short run behavior. As prices change, how are you going to respond immediately to them? If you're running that yogurt shop, you think, and we're not talking about like, when things are way too busy, we got to hook a new franchise, but like, we're a little too busy, right? We should probably hire some more people, right? That's something that you could maybe respond to fairly quickly, right? You could hire somebody by next week and have them working on an extra shift, right? But you couldn't open up a new shop, right? So that first sort of change is what we're talking about here, and as the way that you respond to price. But there's a key distinction here when we're thinking about how things change going from that short run behavior to the long run. What's different about things when you really get a chance to adjust your business behavior, scale things up, scale things down, do whatever you want to do. And there's a bunch of stuff that goes on, but the main way we're going to think about it here is about firms joining the industry, firms leaving or joining the industry. There's definitely going to be some scale up stuff, right? You're going to be able to buy a new factory that makes stuff much more efficiently. But we're going to be thinking, at least at first, about firms leaving or joining the industry. So what do I mean by that? So imagine that you are looking at one of these firms and you're thinking, okay, well, how much profit are they making? And remember, profit to an economist means not just that you're making money, but that you are making more money than you would if you were doing something else, right? Because we're incorporating those opportunity costs, which has an interesting sort of side effect to thinking about profit in that way, which is that if we ever find that it's positive, it probably means that other people are going to want to come in and compete with you, right? Because if you're making a positive profit, you're making more money than you would be doing something else. Well, what about the people who are already doing that something else? Aren't they going to want to start doing what you're doing? Right? Because they say, hey, they're making positive profit. They're making more money than I am. So I should go do what they're doing. Now, that's not something I can do tomorrow. I can't wake up tomorrow and open a yogurt shop. But given enough time, you can respond to that. Okay? So you give people time to respond. And if they see a profit in that industry, they're going to join that industry to compete. And further, if firms in that industry are making a loss, they're going to want to leave. Right? You're making that yogurt shop, you think, well, this could be making a lot more money as a soup shop. Maybe in a couple of years, I'll transform it into a soup shop. I want to leave that yogurt industry. So that's all I just said. So sellers are going to move into profitable industries and out of losing industries. Okay. Now, this has an interesting effect in that in the long run, if you let this sort of process go on for long enough, profits in all the competitive markets are going to go to zero, which is interesting, right? And further, we're going to end up with efficient production. We're going to be efficiently allocating our resources. So I already talked about how the supply and demand curve going to equilibrium will be an efficient allocation of resources, efficient use of resources. That's only the short run, right? It might take time to adjust to things that change. But if you give people time to adjust, well, that's going to lead to efficiency as well. Again, assuming that this is all competitive markets. We'll get to the other stuff later. But if everything is perfectly competitive, then profits are going to go to zero. And we're going to be efficiently using our resources. And further, we're going to be producing the stuff that people actually want to have, right? Because if there's not enough people producing something that people want, then they're going to be able to charge a premium for it. They're going to make a profit. And I'm going to say, hey, look at that profit they're making for making stuff that people want to have. I'm going to go do that too. And then suddenly I'm competing over here. Prices are going to go down a little bit because there's more competition, right? And enough people do that, eventually there's not going to be any profit left over, right? Because there's too much competition over here. So we're going to go into that a little bit more in depth. Think about what's going to happen in the long run. So when you think about the relationship in a competitive market between that individual firm and the market as a whole, right? So this is still going on, right? This has not changed, right? We still have the supply and demand curves. These are still how we get our prices. We just take those prices and we plug them into our individual firm to figure out what the individual firm is going to do. Okay. So let's put pricing? Well, here's our optimal quantity. Here's our equilibrium quantity right here. And here's our equilibrium price. We can follow that price over. That gives us the price that the individual firm sees. From there, they set price equal to marginal cost. There's the quantity that they want to produce. Now remember, the reason we're using that profit with the quantity times price minus average cost is at a glance, we can tell whether they're going to make a profit. Is this firm going to make a positive profit or a negative profit? Raise your hand if you think they're going to make a positive profit. How about a zero profit? How about a negative profit? Or yeah, they're going to make a positive profit because here's the price. It's above the cup of the average cost, right? So you can see that the price is above the average cost right there because there's the average cost of that quantity. We're going to make a positive profit. Price minus average cost is positive. So we have a firm that is making a profit. We can draw in their profit right there. Right, there's that box. So what's going to happen? This firm is making a positive profit, which means that other firms are going to say, wait a minute, why are they making more money than me? I should be making that money. They're going to join this market. And what's going to happen when those other firms join this market? What's going to change on these graphs? Any ideas? Shifts the supply curve. One of the determinants of supply is number of suppliers. So if people look at this graph and they look at the profit numbers and they say, hey, I can be making more money in this industry than I'm making in my own. They join the industry. Supply is going to shift to the right. Right? More suppliers, supply shifts to the right, which is going to bring down the equilibrium price. Right? We have the equilibrium price here. We know what happens with the supply shift to the right. It reduces that equilibrium price, which in turn, price goes down. We've now dropped the level of price that we're seeing over here for the individual firm, which makes them produce a little bit less. Right? Price goes down. You don't want to make quite as much, and makes that profit box shrink, which makes sense. Right? Prices went down. We're making less profit. Right? That's not a shock. So we had profit. People said, "Hey, I want some of that profit." They joined the market. Increased competition, prices went down, profits went down, right? But we still have a profit. There are still profits to be made, which means that there are still people on the outside of this market thinking, hey, I could be having some of this profit, so I'm going to join this market too. And that keeps happening until there's so many people in the market, the competition is so fierce that you've gotten to this zero profit point. But you got to remember, it does not mean they're not making any money. It just means they're not making any more money than they would elsewhere, right? This is the point at which the yogurt shops and the soup shops are each thinking, you know what, I could switch what I'm doing. I could shut down my yogurt shop and make a soup shop, but I wouldn't really make any more money than I'm making right now, so I might as well stick with what I'm doing. Right? I am satisfied. This goes back to our equilibrium idea. There's no unexploited opportunities. Right? There's no yogurt shop owners out there thinking, I can be making more money as a soup shop, because if there are, they're going to do that. So this is the point at which that no longer happens. So the price keeps dropping as competition gets fiercer and fiercer, supply keeps shifting to the right until we hit the point where the firm is making zero profit, at which point nobody wants to join this market and nobody wants to leave this market, and we are at rest. We are at equilibrium. Now this is what's called a long-run equilibrium. Right? The equilibrium we've had before, looking at the supply and demand curve, that is a short-run equilibrium. But what we get if we allow firms to enter and leave the market over a long period of time is we get this long-run equilibrium. And in the long-run equilibrium, by definition, if we're talking about a competitive market, we have zero profits. All right, so we've reached the long-run equilibrium. Everybody who thought there was more profit to be made in this industry has already joined. There's now no more profit to be mined. We've sort of gotten it all. We've had so much competition that it's driven prices down to a zero profit point. And that's going to stay that way during the long run equilibrium until something changes, like the price of the complement good rises. Right? The price of the complement good rises, you're going to buy less of that complement good, which means you also need less of this good, which means demand is going to shift which direction? Raise your hand if you think it's left. Left. Raise your hand if you think it's right. It's going to go to the left, right? We have fewer of the complement goods, we need fewer of this good too. So we have a leftward shift in demand, which is going to drop the price. Now, we were just at the point where we were making zero profit. So price goes down, we're going to make even less profit. We're going to make a negative profit. Now, the process for drawing out a negative profit is the exact same as the process for drawing out a positive profit. It's just this time price is below the average cost. Right? So I've got it here. Let's also draw it ourselves on the board. Might be a little bit easier to see. So if I want to show a loss here, I know where I'm going to have to draw the price. I'm going to have to draw it below the average cost curve, right? Because we know the price needs to be below average cost to make a loss. So I'll draw it down here. There's a price or our demand, however you want to put it. So now we maximize our profits. We're still trying to maximize our profits. We know we're going to lose, but we're just trying to lose as little as possible. Again, relative to our other options. So we take price. We set it equal to marginal cost. That's step number one. Follow price along until we get to marginal cost, and then that is going to be our profit maximizing quantity right there. Step number two, we're going to take our quantity, plug it into average cost. So we take our quantity, we follow it up until we hit average cost, and there is our average cost. Finally, profit is a box with quantity on one side and price minus average cost on the other. So here we have quantity on one side, we have price minus average cost on the other. Now price minus average cost is negative. So whatever area we find here, that is going to be our loss. And it's still going to be the same box. We got this box right here. That is our negative profit.
How would you know that it was going to be negative? What number would be negative?
So it's the fact that price is less than average cost.
Okay.
So because quantity is, or because profit is quantity times price minus average cost, if this term is negative, if price is less than average cost, we have a negative profit. So this is going to happen anytime that price drops below the average cost. It just happens in this particular instance. I said that it happened, that it dropped because of the price of a comparable good went up. But yeah, it could be any reason why the price went up. So we've gotten to this negative profit scenario. Now, negative profit, again, they might still be making money in an accounting sense, but in an economic sense, this means that they could be making more money doing something else. So that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to say, hey, I'm making an economic loss here, so I should be doing something else. I'm going to leave this industry, go do something else. Right? This is the case in which the yogurt shop owners like, I could be making more money with soup. I'm going to leave yogurt, go make some soup. Right? So they're going to leave this industry, which just like when they came in, supply shifted right. This time when they leave, supply is going to shift left, which is going to bring the price back up. And once again, it's going to keep happening. People are going to keep leaving the market until they're no longer better off by leaving. And when that happens, we are back at the zero profit point. So if the price is high enough that they're making a profit, more competition is going to come in until that stops being true and we have zero profit. If they're making less money than they need to make to break even, then people are going to leave because they could be making more money doing something else, and that's going to raise prices with less competition until we again get back to that zero profit point. Our long run equilibrium. Any questions here? Yeah. Yeah, basically. Yeah, anytime the price changes away from this long run equilibrium, we would expect that given enough time, people would leave and join the market until we get back to it. Yeah.
So when it's a positive profit, does that mean that's the short run?
Yes, yeah. So if we're seeing a positive profit and the market is competitive, then that means that we're in a short run. So a couple things to keep in mind with all of this. So for one, this all depends on the idea that we have A, competitive markets, and B, free entry and exit for all firms. That's a very important part of this, right? All this long run moving in and out behavior is predicated on the idea that it's fairly easy to move from one industry to another or start or close a business. If that's not true, then we wouldn't expect this to quite play out all the way. We would still expect this to be there to some extent, but you'd expect a muted response. So this is going to be less true, for example, in a market that takes a lot of startup costs, right? You have to spend billions and billions of dollars to open a business. Then you can say, hey, they're making a profit over there, and still not try to compete with them because you just don't have the startup money, right? So if, for example, you observe that airlines are making a profit, they're like, well, hey, airlines are making a profit, I should start an airline. And then you realize that it costs billions and billions of dollars to start an airline, and you're like, well, no, I guess they can keep making that profit. right? But the same thing is true about leaving the market. If it's hard to leave the market, then A, you might expect that firms might stay in even if they're making a loss. Or B, then you might expect that they might not want to enter that market in the first place out of fear that eventually they will make a loss, right? So if the market is hard to exit, that can be a problem as well. So that's one thing. Another thing, all of this idea of zero profits and all this supply curve shifts only occurs in the long run. It doesn't happen immediately. It takes a while to get to that point where you have these zero profits and all the firms that have entered want to enter and all the firms that have left want to leave. So economic profits can occur in the short run, just like the question. It's just in the long run, we'd expect them to get sort of wiped out. Sort of a third sort of shadow point here is that technically what we're talking about is zero profit for the marginal firm, the firm that's just on the edge of joining or entering or leaving the market. If some firms are more efficient producers than others, then they can still make a profit, right? It could well be, let's say that I'm, the most efficient, bespoke purse maker in the world, and I can do it super efficiently. You have me make a super fancy purse, it's going to cost me $5 to do it because I'm just that good, right? But I'm the only person who's that good, right? Everybody else is not quite as efficient as me. And it turns out the zero profit point for fancy purses is, let's say, $300 for a fancy purse, right? Now, that could be the zero profit point, and that could be the point at which nobody wants to enter or exit the market, right? The person who is just barely still in the market could be like, well, my costs are $299, and the next person who might join the market might be like, well, my cost would be $301. It's just barely not worth it for me to join, right? Those people are making zero profit. I, on the other hand, over here, able to make purses for $5, I'm still making a profit, even in the long run. But again, that's just for me as a super special, purse maker kind of guy. For the market as a whole, we would still have that zero profit condition. And that shadow third point I just mentioned, I'm not going to test you on. It's just, if you're wondering how this all links up to the real world, there's a sort of caveat going on. Something else about this to note is that this zero profit condition means something else. If we look back at our graph, where this zero profit condition happens, it's at the minimum of our average cost, the very bottom of the cup. What does that mean? It means we are producing this good as cheaply as it can possibly be produced. We have chosen the scale at which costs are minimized, which is great. It means we are using as few resources as possible to produce this stuff in the long run, right? That's one source of the sort of efficiency result that we get here, that we are able to produce at a very efficient rate because we have managed to get ourselves to the bottom of this curve where we are producing very, very cheaply. Right? That is, in fact, the minimum of the average cost curve where they cross, which is why I emphasize so much that they cross the minimum, which gives us the result that we are, using as few resources as possible to fulfill the market's needs. So because of this, as demand ebbs and flows between different markets, firms are chasing that demand, right? I mentioned the price of a complement good rising, so you don't want as much of this one. That means that people are going to want to move their device to other stuff instead of this thing. Right, whatever it is. And so when you're leaving this industry, you might be going to that industry. You're going to be chasing the profits, which means you're chasing what people want all the time, right? This is something that you learn in business school, right? And you're going to be trying to chase what people want to some degree, which is good from this resource usage perspective, right? You want to make stuff people want. That is how you produce value in society. That's where the marginal benefit comes from, right? Is by giving people stuff that they want and makes their lives better. So the stuff that we want tends to get made when we want it, and the market can shift to meet that need. So if tastes change, then the market can change along with it, as long as you give the market enough time to adjust. Right? Something gets super popular for a brief moment, that thing's going to make a lot of profit, but then eventually the competitors will roll in and it will go to zero profit because you're going to be providing people with the stuff that they want.